Sweet. So guys, welcome to another photo processing tutorial video thing, whatever. Trying out a new camera angle, see how it looks. So I had a request for a sunset, and also I've got to try to keep this video length down so let's not screw around for too long, and I've just seen I've got a hell of a lot of sensor spots, so that's going to be an issue. Right, basically got my sunset shot here. I could decide whether to do this one here. Nice composition with the nice pointy hill here leading up to the sun in the middle, but for the purpose of this video I've got a bit of extra cloud up in the sky, so I'm going to do an HDR blend. So I've got my 3 bracketed exposures, so I'm going to choose this one just because that higher cloud's going to help us out with that a bit. So basically what am I shooting at? I was ISO 320 because it was pretty windy and I wanted to kind of capture this grass not being all blurry and floppy. I've gone f16, wanted a lot of depth of field, and I wanted a good sun star here in the middle too. And yeah, brightest one's 30th of a second, 80th of a second for the middle exposure, and 200th of a second for the darker one for those highlights in the sky. Basically, I'm going to work on this middle exposure and just get all my dynamic range there, because basically this has got pretty much everything I need. In fact, if it does have everything I need, do we need to exposure blend this? I don't know. Let's see. So yeah, just doing my usual bit of white. Actually, I'll drop that down a bit. Touch of dehaze, 15 and 5 on the vibrance and saturation. It's pretty blue. Definitely going to desaturate them blues. Let's just go 6400, warm it up a little bit. 2 clicks of magentas up to 20. 23 on the lights, so let's go down to 20, just not push it too far. 8 on the darks is good. Touch of shadows, 11, that's nice, and a little touch of highlights as well. Yeah, so now I've got the nice kind of overall colours. I've overexposed these bits a little, so I could HDR blend out of the one photo, the same exposure, but I'm going to use the multiple exposures just for educational purposes. Sharpening, 97, radius, 0.8, little touch of detail, a little 50 masking, whatever, and oh, I'm at ISO 320. Let's go in, have a look see. Yeah, it looks pretty good. 22 in noise reduction, we can deal with that. And the saturation, let's desaturate them blues, minus 16, let's go minus 21, that'll do. This is where I will use a little bit of split toning, so I'm going to get the oranges in there, and probably go, let's say, 5 in those highlights. Nah, that didn't really do anything. Let's go 10, that's better. Shadows, we won't worry about them. I'm pretty happy with the colours I've got there. Remove chromatic aberration, yes. Let's do a little bit of vignetting. Now we're at f16, so there's not a whole lot of vignetting there, that'll do. Post-crop vignette, I will add a little bit, so 13 is probably too much, but I'll bring that midpoint in, feather up, bring up the highlights, so we're looking quite dark. Let's go 6, 7, 7's alright, there we go. And lastly, little touch of shadows to the magenta, just to subtle little difference. Sweet, so that's basically how it's going to look overall. A lot of you, if you don't want to do HDR blending, I mean for this photo, don't really need it. I can just bring down the exposure and paint that one in over the top again if I wanted. But I will select these guys, go up to this top corner and hit sync settings. So now my darker one is at the same settings. Basically, if I hit O, that will bring up the overexposed, I don't know what that's called actually, the little red marks that show you where it's overexposed. Basically, I just want to push them a little bit. So the key is you want to get this darker exposure looking pretty similar to the lighter exposure in terms of how bright they are. So I'll actually get rid of that O for a second. Just kind of flicking back and forward and seeing how much light I've got in these brighter areas, because basically I'm just going to paint in those bright areas. So yeah, we're looking pretty good. I'll leave it at that. And I might use this brighter exposure for the foreground as well. Get a bit cleaner, less noise. think the grass isn't too blurry, so I'm going to have him a little bit brighter maybe. I'll darken it down 2-3 clicks. What's that look like? Yeah, so this brighter exposure is almost the same exposure. It's a little bit brighter, but it just means I can get my foreground a little bit brighter in there. So I'm going to paint that over. So I'm not going to end up actually using much of this exposure, kind of half the sky and maybe a little bit of these mountains in here. But basically, select those 3, open images, and wait a little while. Computer's trying. Try and keep this quick. I'm not going to delete all those million of sensor spots because that's just going to take far too long. I'm going to base everything. My aperture blades look kind of funky, and some of them are kind of, my lens might be a little bit decentered, that's not good. Anyway, let's not worry about that. I'm going to base everything off this middle exposure, so let's go over to the lightest exposure, Command A, Command C to highlight it and copy it, Command V to paste it in there, hold Option, give it a layer mask, then I'll get my darker exposure over here, again Command A, Command C, back to this guy, Command V, and give him a darker layer mask. My exposures have moved slightly, that's interesting. Maybe I did these ones handheld. Well, that gives me the opportunity. Just going to select all of these layers, go Edit, Auto Align Layers. Auto, okay, and apparently I can't do it with a blank layer mask. Let's unblank them. Try again. Edit, Auto Align Layers. Keep it on auto. Cool. Oops. Yeah, that looks a little better. Okay. So again, get that layer mask black by hitting Command Delete. And I want to go up here. Actually, first, before I do that, this is my brighter exposure. Basically just going to get a brush. You know what, I'll do it with the fill tool, might be quicker. Go for gradient, 100%, and let's just paint him in from about here. Give a little bit of a gradient just so that has filled that bottom half of the image with my slightly brighter, slightly cleaner and less noisy exposure. Yeah, you can definitely see the difference in noise over here if we have a look. Noisy, clean, noisy, clean. So there you go. I'm going to get a brush 100% and actually bring that quite down in size and just paint it in. Let me see my mask here. Over the mountains, just roughly. Just going to make sure make sure those mountains are a little bit cleaner and less noisy. That'll do. Just make sure I haven't gone over the sky too much. No, good. So here comes the important part, blending in the sky exposure. So basically we're going to keep most of this sky, but just these sections here that are overexposed, particularly in these clouds, we're going to paint in there with a luminosity mask. So I'm going down to the channels section and I've found bright lights for these sky blends usually is the best. So I'll play that and that's going to give me a selection over here in the channels tab. So we'll hold Command, click on that, and as you can see it's just selected all those bright areas. So basically we're just going to paint that mask in with that selection active. But to help you with what you're seeing, hold Command H and that's just going to hide that selection. So it's still there, still active. Then we get brush, 33%, make sure my hardness is at 0, flow of 57, somewhere around there is pretty good. And I'll just gently paint over the sky a whole bunch of times, just slowly bringing in that darker exposure. I'm just going to click a bunch of times over the sun there. I'll click a bunch of times here as well because I want that fully blended. So I'm just clicking away there. Let's click away like crazy over this section as well. That'll do. Now I'm just going to hold while I'm painting up here. Don't want to go too nuts over these clouds in the sky. You can get a little bit of banding doing this, those funky lines as your gradients change. So that's the only problem with luminosity masking and using those masks, is that can happen. But this is a kind of detailed one, so it shouldn't matter too much. Right, basically, let's go at Command D, so that's deselecting that selection, just so I don't catch myself out with the next adjustments. Flicking back and forward between that, that's pretty nice. I reckon I've done the sun a little too much, so I'm going to go back in there. 33% brush X to make my brush black, and I'll just click, we'll paint that out just in the middle of the sun a little bit, just so that sun stays really nice and bright, but I've got those nice yellows around them. Cool, and now I need to deal with these edge parts here being all white, so I'm just going to use the Content Aware tool, but before I do that, let's go Layer, Flatten Image. No, actually I'm going to be lazy and I'm just going to crop that down, because doing Content Aware on those might take a little while, so I'll just zoom right in here, drag that over, and do that one first. And again, drag that down just a touch. I'm going to actually need to zoom in a lot more. Go over it a little bit, that'll do. Same with this side. Get in there nice and close. Well, that's going to take ages. There we go. And how's that bottom here? Need to crop you to get in there real close. I'm at 3,353%. It's definitely close. Cool. Wait, get out of there. Click too much. We do still have a little bit of white. No, we don't. Tripping out. Layer, flatten image. There we go. Let's call it sun in the middle. On my desktop. It's a pretty lame name, but who cares? Right. Now, basically now, yeah, I'd fix all those lovely little sensor spots that I've got hanging around there, but that's going to take far too much time. Try and be really quick on this. Going to do a curves adjustment for a bit of contrast with that light luminosity mask. That's cool. Let's slap a bit of tonal contrast on there. Just give me some nice kind of contrast and tones to work with from the get-go. I say the get-go, I've already been in it for probably 10 minutes. Anyway, where are you? Tonal contrast. So as always, I'll turn that way down. Let's go 50, 15, 27, 15, a little bit less saturation, a little bit of shadows. Don't want to lift them up too much because I've already got my exposure pretty much how I want it. And let's bring the highlights down here, 25. There we go. So pretty intense adjustment. As always, I will bring it into Photoshop, give it a layer mask and just paint it in gently. Jon Snow hasn't fallen over yet. I'm doing well. I only just moved him because I moved the camera. So, hit the G tool, and I need actually not the gradient one, but the fill paint bucket tool. Make sure my color's white, 44% overall. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I could go a bit more on the mountains, so I've just gone to 33% opacity to get a little bit more detail in there. Let's go right across here. That looks pretty good. Maybe just do it over the grass as well, in fact. Command Z, go back, let's do it with a bigger brush, save some time. How's that look? Command Z, back and forward, really subtle, but that'll do. So that overall, nice little bit of contrast. I can actually, or what I've done as well, is when you do a contrast adjustment, your yellows and oranges tend to go a bit more yellow. So I'm going to get a hue and saturation layer on the yellows and just bring the hue down by -2, maybe -3. How's -2 look? So a really subtle adjustment, basically just looking, if I zoom right in at these yellows in here, you'll see that's without, more yellow, with more orange. So that just gets them back to sort of how they were looking, because I noticed that things did look a little bit more yellow. It's definitely affected the grass as well, but I kind of like that grass with a little bit more of a reddy tint to it. So we'll go with that. Hue and saturation layer again, and I'm going to go to the blues, desaturate them, 21, Command Delete to make that mask black. Yay. Let's go 33%. I'm just going to paint over Ben Lomond here in Queenstown because he's looking quite blue. More focusing just on this area that's further away. Over here is not too bad, especially down the bottom. It gets a bit closer, it's not bad. Just at the top there, a little bit more. There we go, and let's do a little quick run over Cecil and Bayonet Peak over here. Cool. Do I want to... Yeah, I might do a little levels adjustment as well with a luminosity mask. So again, I'm going to go bright lights on that. And that's just going to select all those bright areas, give me a nice mask, and then put a levels adjustment to it. So as I bring that down, you can see that's just bringing those brighter tones down a bit, a little bit more colour in there. Probably a little too much. Bring that back up just a little bit. Should do. Saving as I go. Trying to keep it quick, but this is taking a while, as always. Now I reckon I'm going to throw a little bit of a sunlight filter on there to get a bit of glow and a bit of warmth on things. So I'm going to keep that temperature where it's at, drop it down to maybe 20, let's go 24 on brightness, just drop it down a little bit of contrast up to 43 on those numbers. Doesn't look too bad, it's definitely intense. So again, layer mask on it, paint it in gently. I'll do a fill tool, 33%. See how that looks, go from there. So again, option, click on that mask button, G, 44%, let's go 33, paint that in there. So yeah, just going back and forward, subtle, nice bit of glow. Let's try it at 44, push it a little bit. That's nice. Yeah, let's go 44. Sweet. I will also go Command Option Shift E and look at giving this a little bit of vignette with the camera raw filter, using that post crop vignette over here. So let's go P to flick back and forward. Kind of like it up in the sky, not so much down on the grass. So I'll bring that into Photoshop and layer mask, use that gradient tool, and let's go 70% black. So I'm just going to drag that up here and paint out that adjustment about 70% down in the foreground, so it's still doing a little bit just in these corners. Now I can actually point at the screen because you can see where I'm pointing. It's not too bad, maybe a little too much. Let's go down to 77%. Just a little bit off. Cool. Let's kind of finish things off. Usually I do a little bit more kind of subtle little adjustments, playing around with things, but I shouldn't drag this one out too long. So let's go little classical soft focus, as I kind of always do with this on, -11 on the brightness, 77 on the highlights, 3 or 4 on the shadows. We'll throw that on there. I reckon again, let's do a fill of, I'll go 33% effective over the whole thing, and then I might paint it in a little bit around the mountains. So option, click that layer mask, go back to the fill tool, make sure it's white, 33%, fill that, and then let's go a brush of 33% and just go over those bright sections a little bit around the sun, a little bit over here, and a little touch up in these clouds. Don't want to go too nuts, maybe in there as well. It's almost a little too much. Again, I'll drop that down, let's go 69%. Yeah, that's better. I'll save that. And one thing I do really like about the shot is that lovely light that's coming in under this moody cloud here. So I want to bring that out a little touch. So lastly, Command Option Shift E to make a new layer down there. Filter, camera raw filter, and I'm just going to push the whites a little bit, see what that does. So again, I'm just looking at this section, not concerned with anything else that's going on really. And then I'll maybe do a little bit of lights as well. That's too much, just a touch. So yeah, I might use a little bit in there, a little bit of that, and mostly in there. And that should look nice. Okay. Again, option, click the layer mask button, brush, 33%. Make it a bit smaller and just paint over these bits a little touch. Get a bit more in this colour in here. maybe a little bit in there. Let's do a little touch down here as well, just brightens that up, a little bit of colour anywhere else. I think this corner's also looking a touch dark, so we'll give him a quick little blast with that as well. You can definitely get carried away with adjustments like this, but that should look pretty nice. So there you go, that's looking quite nice already. I'll save that. Could do a little bit of nik define if I wasn't happy with the noise, but because I exposure blended that, it came out pretty good. It's not too noisy down in here. Could do a sharpening filter, but with that being ISO 320, it might sharpen the noise a bit much. I'm not really going to print this shot unless someone really wants to buy it. I don't think it's all that incredible to be worthy of a print, so might just post it. But there you go. Hope that helped. Oh, actually, one last thing. I'm just seeing these clouds, they're a bit blue. Let's do a little bit of a blues desaturation. Again, I'm just looking up in here, so let's flick back and forward. Let's paint that in just a little bit. So once again, brush, 33%. Quick drag along there. One more. How else are we looking? A little bit of blue there. And maybe a touch more on the mountains, because I can. Yeah, really subtle little adjustment, just to finish things off. There you go. Hope that helped. Please like and subscribe the video if this helped you, if you're enjoying it. There's plenty more to be coming, and please leave some comments below. Let me know what you guys want to see, what you want to hear, any tips, tricks, post your own photos, Facebook, Instagram. You can message me if you need any help. Get in touch. Cheers.